Hey guys, welcome back to my channel. I am so happy that you're here today. Welcome back to What I'm Watching Wednesdays, where I'm going to sit down, I'm going to do my makeup, and I'm going to talk about what I'm watching. My last kind of trial of this series was about WandaVision. I was able to talk to you about my thoughts about the last couple episodes of WandaVision. I really loved making those videos, so I thought I would do the same thing for the Falcon and the Winter Soldier. So ideally, I'm going to be back here every Wednesday at 2 p.m. Eastern to sit down and talk to you guys about everything going on with Falcon and the Winter Soldier as new episodes premiere each week. If you're new here, hi, my name is Katey Unfiltered, and on my channel, I like to talk about makeup, TV, whatever it is that's capturing my interest. I'm always going to give you my unfiltered opinion. But without further ado, let's go ahead and just jump into the video because there is a lot. And I know, I feel like I say that in every single video. I'm like, there's a lot to say, but there really is. And I've spent a couple of days, it is Sunday night right now, and I spent a couple of days thinking about this first episode of The Falcon and the Winter Soldier. I feel the same way that I felt when I started watching WandaVision. I am absolutely excited, please don't get me wrong, but I just feel a little bit cautious right now because I really don't know what to expect. I didn't go into watching this series really expecting anything. I didn't really come into it with any sort of preconceived notions about the storyline or what I thought we were going to see. And I think part of the reason that I wanted to keep that perspective was with WandaVision, I really let my mind run wild with myself on conspiracy theories and everything I thought would happen in the TV show that definitely didn't happen. And so I just wanted to take a little bit more of a conservative approach with Falcon and the Winter Soldier. And I say all that to say that most of this video is just going to be me wildly speculating about what I think is going to happen. So get ready for all of that. I think the first thing that I want to call out is that I'm really excited to see that they're diving into what the blip did to world politics and what it's really done to the world and how nations interact with one another. Captain America has always done a really good job of touching on politics in a way that doesn't take you out of the story. So I'm excited to see that that's going to be a central component of this show. It also is a little bit of a darker take than Spider-Man took. So if you've watched Spider-Man, I think it's Spider-Man Homecoming? Spider-Man Far From Home. If you've seen Spider-Man Far From Home, you do see a little bit of the world after the blip and how everyone is starting to rebuild in that movie. But Spider-Man takes a much happier approach to it. So it's cool to see this darker, grittier kind of perspective. It makes sense because Bucky and Sam are both soldiers or former soldiers or contractors, whatever their status is with the government these days. They have experience going to war and being soldiers. So taking that perspective is pretty neat. And I like that the story is also touching on really the effects of PTSD in a way that feels a little bit more honest than I think a lot of shows have done in the past. I think something that's super interesting is that the show really focuses a lot later on with Sam and the banker. They're focusing a lot on the change of resources now that half the planet has come back after 5 years, and how that's really put a lot of stress on the infrastructure, stress on the financial system, and how that is playing out for certain groups of people. And I think that there's a really interesting conversation to have about race in general through this TV show that I'm very excited that they're touching on. But I thought it was kind of ironic that everybody comes back and then we have this show, and in the first episode it's like, hey, remember how Thanos got rid of half of people because there were resource problems? Well, turns out if half of you come back, there's even more resource problems. I'm not saying that Thanos was right. I'm just saying it's a little ironic. I'm super stoked that they've brought back George St. Pierre and that we got to see him doing a ton of really awesome martial arts. And if you remember, he was someone that was really pretty evenly matched with Captain America when they were doing their fist fight. So this one was, honestly, it met a lot of my expectations for how, intense that fight should have been. But it's cool. I'm hoping that he comes back in future episodes. I really like George St. Pierre generally as a fighter, but also I've really loved his portrayal of Batroc the Leaper in the MCU. So that could potentially be pretty exciting. I'm hoping that he's around for more than one episode. I'm hoping that they weren't just pulling him in for a little blip of action in the beginning of the series. I'm also pretty excited that they've introduced the character of Joaquin, who effectively in the comics is Falcon's sidekick. So everyone on the internet is super upset that we're potentially going to kill off this character at some point during the show, which, I mean, I wouldn't put it past them. And I think there is an interesting story there to tack it back on to Riley, I think is the character's name, who Falcon had talked about in Captain America Winter Soldier when they met, that he had lost someone named Riley and how that affected him. And I think if Sam and Joaquin are going to get really close in this series, I wonder if they're just going to explore that loss more deeply and use Joaquin as a way to tell a little bit more of that story and a little bit more of the story of like the soldier's loss and his own kind of journey with PTSD and loss and leaving the military and that side of things in his emotional journey. I really like the scene where Joaquin goes and he tracks down the flag smashers and he's there to infiltrate and see what's going on and this, I think, bank robbery is what it was. And what I did miss in that scene was that it seemed like more than one character had some sort of super strength, but I went back and rewatched it and was like, well, it kind of does seem like more than one of them has this super strength. And I really thought it was just, the one main guy that smashed him in the head with his foot, who I assume is Flag Smasher, the villain. They didn't actually give the character a name yet on the show, but I'm pretty sure that's supposed to be the actual Flag Smasher. It seems like a lot of them have this sort of super strength, which if you watch the end credits, it does seem like we're going to be dealing with some sort of super soldiers. And since a part of the plot is Bucky really making amends with his past and having to face people that he's hurt and kind of own up to a lot of his actions, I feel like something that will be important is the fact that he stole a bunch of super serum from Howard Stark back in 91, and we really don't know where a lot of that super serum went. I think we know that some of it went to these other Winter Soldiers that he then, found later killed by Zemo, right? And this is all in Captain America Civil War. I guess it's possible that some of that serum could still exist, or that the recipe still exists, or something like that, and that some of that serum has been given to members of the Flag Smashers. I think one thing that we never really saw with Bucky was him atoning and owning up for his sins against Howard Stark and Tony Stark and the murder of the Starks. And so I wonder if through this series we're going to get a little bit of that redemption for him. And that does make me think that the introduction of Zemo later on in the series makes a little bit more sense, because I was having a hard time before watching this episode wrapping my head around why he would be back and why they'd be using this character again. Zemo had a pretty clear end to his journey at the end of Civil War. He was trying to avenge his family and he was going to off himself, and Black Panther stopped him. And I just kind of assumed that the guy was like in jail, but we actually don't know what happened to Zemo. So I'm wondering if something with the super serum that we then see in the end credits, and we see the end credits also alluding to the death of the Starks. We also then see that these Flag Smashers have superpowers, and I'm just like, I'm getting out my whiteboard, I'm connecting all the red strings, I'm doing exactly what I did with WandaVision, I know. Going back to talking about Sam here for a second, I think one of Sam's big kind of journey is going to be finding his own confidence as Falcon and as Captain America's successor. Because if you think about Sam specifically in the MCU, he hasn't really had a lot of the superhero's journey. He's just kind of someone that became friends with Steve and helped out Steve a lot, and then was around to help out with Thanos, and he really started stepping into some bigger responsibilities, but he hasn't really identified himself with being a superhero. He probably just more identifies as being a soldier and being someone who does want to save people and save the day, but he's also not super. He doesn't have superpowers, he has super skills, and he has a set of wings that allow him to fly, but among the Marvel superheroes, he's an everyman, which we see a lot of when he's with his family and they're talking about their family business. He has real world, real man problems while also having exposure to this world of just like superheroes and supervillains and just like these super crazy experiences. And we get a little touch of the character's kind of, I don't know, outsider feeling, like his feeling of being an outsider. We get some of that in Age of Ultron. If you go back and watch it, he's in the party scene in the beginning of the film where, and this is right before Ultron, reveals himself as the major villain. Everyone is celebrating getting Loki's scepter, and Falcon is there, and he's talking to Captain America, and he's just kind of on the outside looking in, saying like, this is your world, this isn't my world, this is too much. He's really not like a showy guy, and he's not someone that sees himself as the center of attention, and he's not someone that sees himself as equal or, as big of a contributor to saving the world as these other grand heroes. I mean, let's face it, he kind of isn't, He's not a god. He doesn't have super strength. He's not a super soldier. But that doesn't mean that his contributions aren't valuable. And I think that one of the reasons that Captain America chose him to be his successor is because Steve knows the value of someone coming from humble beginnings and not having super strength and not being the toughest and the biggest and the strongest. He knows what it means to be the smallest guy on the squad, but be handed something so big and so powerful, and the value of having that beginning and having that in your soul when the opportunity comes to step into bigger shoes, what that does to the person. And it goes back to that quote that Stanley Tucci says in the first Captain America movie, which is, the super serum made the good better and the bad worse. I'm paraphrasing, but that's more or less what the quote was. It can seem really confusing at first why Captain America chose Sam to be his successor, but when you think about it in those terms, it completely makes sense. And I think what we're going to see from Sam in this show is he's going to be almost forced into stepping into bigger shoes, taking on his role as the next Captain America, and believing in himself a little bit more as someone who can carry that mantle. At the end of Endgame, I actually was pretty surprised that the next Captain America wasn't Bucky. I really thought it was going to be Bucky because in some of the comics, it is Bucky. But when I think about it from that perspective, it actually makes way more sense why it wasn't Bucky. And I think Bucky's got a lot of growing and a lot of learning to do on his own. He's got to make his amends, and he's got to kind of do the work and do the therapy and really come to terms with his past and figure out what he wants for his life. He's not really ready to take on the role of Captain America, nor do I think he wants to. He talks a lot about just wanting peace and wanting to step down from the fight and not really wanting to live that life anymore. And he's lived it for, 100 years. So I think the way that it's been laid out and the choices that were made are actually really starting to make sense to me. I'm really excited for this storyline to play out with Bucky and his friend, the older Asian gentleman, and watching his struggle with PTSD and his struggle dealing with, the reality of what he's done in his past. I think to an extent, right, he needs to be able to accept that it wasn't his fault. He was brainwashed. He didn't know what he was doing. There's a certain level of vindication that I think you can get from that and saying well, it wasn't really mean. It wasn't my fault, but I do admire that he still wants to take accountability for his actions and that he still feels very responsible. And that is the biggest sign to me that he really is no longer the Winter Soldier. He really is no longer this brainwashed character that he was before. Is he feels a major sense of accountability and is actively working to wipe the red out of his ledger. I think one thing that's also kind of interesting is Steve Rogers always kind of seemed like the old soul, right? He always seemed like he was 100 years old, but for whatever reason, Bucky really doesn't. And they do call out his age on the show, and they call it out when he's interacting with the waitress that he goes on a date on. He talks about not knowing how to hit on women and doesn't understand online dating. And so you do get a taste of him being this older gentleman and growing up in another generation, but not in the same way as Steve Rogers. And I just wonder if that's because, he really wasn't under ice. He did live all those years as the Winter Soldier, or if Bucky's just cooler than Steve Rogers. I mean, he always was a lot cooler, but I just wonder if it doesn't feel so stark because he wasn't under ice and because he was always a little bit cooler. He just seems like he fits in this time a little bit better than Steve ever did. I also love that Bucky sleeps on the floor. It reminds me of a conversation that Sam and Steve Rogers had back in the Captain America Winter Soldier movie, where Sam talks about, you know, his bed was too soft and he misses like kind of sleeping on rocks, and has this bonding moment with Steve Rogers where they're talking about how their beds are too comfortable. And it was just kind of a nice little homage to that conversation and call out to say like, hey, Sam and Bucky actually have way more in common than I think we have initially realized. That they're both soldiers. You know, they're both the everyman in a lot of ways, but they have a lot of similarities in their background. And these are two characters that have kind of always been at odds and are not BFFs. And they called that out in the trailer, that like these guys are not like best friends, even though they work on the same side and they've worked on the same team. It's like they aren't necessarily close, but I think it's going to take a lot for these characters to spend some time getting to know one another and realize that they actually have quite a bit in common. And so I think that this little scene of Bucky sleeping on the floor is just one way that the show is showing that Sam and Bucky have a lot in common. I've talked a little bit about what I think is going to happen with Zemo. I'm very excited about that. I'm really excited for him to show up. I really liked the portrayal of that character, Captain America Civil War. I always get Civil War and Winter Soldier mixed up, so like, please forgive me. I'm so sorry if I do that at any point in these videos. I really liked how they handled that character and his story, and I'm just like really eager for him to show up as our supervillain, because I also really like that actor. I thought he was so good, and his presence is so cool and chilling, but at the same time calming and relaxing. I do wonder if they're going to bring Flag Smasher into the show, the actual villain, who is a real life villain in the comics that I'm not as familiar with as with a lot of other characters, and so I've definitely got some reading to do on that. But I do wonder if they're going to bring in the actual villain, or if they're just going to turn it into kind of this like anarchist organization in the show, which is all we've really seen so far. It hasn't been directly tied to any one individual, rather than it just being the Flag Smasher, it's the Flag Smashers. The Smithsonian scene at the beginning of the episode really felt honestly like Captain America's funeral in a lot of ways, which we never really got, and we don't know if he's actually gone or not. And it wasn't a funeral. It had funeral vibes. I think it's important that it wasn't actually a funeral, and that Captain America could still... Wait, am I wrong? Did they talk about him going or dying? I don't remember. I think I need to go back and watch it, because I don't feel like they confirmed whether or not he was actually dead or not. Either way, I mean, he's retired. He's not coming back, but I think it's important to note that the door may still be a little bit open for him to come back, but realistically, like, he's an old guy now. He's not coming back. I think we all need to just like accept that and move on, including myself. But the Smithsonian really felt like his funeral in a lot of ways, and was really representative of the journey that Sam has to go on to really, know that he can fill Steve's shoes in all the ways that matter, which are, in his commitment to his country and his commitment to protecting people, to protecting the little guy, because he is the little guy. But in all the ways that matter, Sam really lives up to the legacy of Captain America. And this is just the start of him showing us that like he isn't there yet, and that's the hero's journey that he has to go on in this series. Holy moly, the most heartbreaking scene imaginable was that last scene where John Walker gets introduced as the new Captain America, and Sam is just sitting there watching it on TV being like, oh my God, what have I done? He thought he was giving the shield back over to the US government, for safekeeping, to be in this museum. He thought he was respecting his friend, do the right thing. And in reality, all it was the US government trying to take the shield for themselves so that they could create their own, like, knockoff version of Captain America. And if you remember from the comics, like if you read the comics at all, John Walker is for a time kind of a villain. And I wonder if they're going to do that with him in this show. I think that he'll probably not be a villain, but definitely be someone that maybe takes a different stance, a different extreme stance in this whole anarchist world order storyline that we're getting. And I do hope that he ends up, being a good character, because he does in the comics end up being something of a hero. He's not a big character. He's not one that like I know actually a ton about, but I do know that. And so I'm just curious as to how they're going to use this guy. And I'm also really looking forward to Falcon probably kicking his ass at some point to take back the shield and take on the mantle as Captain America that he so rightfully deserves. I also wonder if they're going to take the super serum storyline as far as giving it to John Walker, because in the comics he does have some sort of like super soldier strength. He does have some of those abilities. And so I wonder if the US government is then going to be involved in creating a super soldier in John Walker, and if there's going to be a case for maybe the government's involved in creating these like super villains with the flag smashers. Like, who knows? But I'm really excited. I'm really excited for the political commentary that's definitely going to come from this show. Like I said in the beginning of this video, I feel like Captain America, and I know this isn't Captain America, but this is in like the Captain America sphere of stories. Marvel has always used Captain America to tell really powerful stories, to comment on political climates, and do it in a really cool, gritty superhero way. But they're also really grounded in reality, and they're grounded with these characters that not all of them have superpowers. Some of them are just like normal people that are like fighting the good fight. And I really like that Captain America has always balanced between that. So I'm pumped. I'm pumped to see what happens in this show. I'm officially excited. I'm on board. And oh my gosh, when is Agent 13 showing up? I need it. I need some Sharon Carter in my life. I can't wait. I just can't wait. Okay, I'm getting myself like rehyped and repumped up like doing this ending. So I think that's it for this video. I have finished this look. I finished my thoughts on this first episode of Falcon and the Winter Soldier. If you liked this video, if you would like to see more of these videos, please don't forget to leave it a like. And as always, I love it when you guys leave me a comment down below. Give me your thoughts. What was I right about? What was I wrong about? I want to hear your takes and your predictions as well. This is definitely a community that we're building here, and I just love that there are people that keep coming back to watch these videos. So thank you guys so much for spending your time with me. It really means a lot to me. If you haven't yet, please consider subscribing. We are officially 108 strong in the Unfiltered fam, and I just love making these videos for you guys. I hope you enjoy watching them. New episodes of What I'm Watching Wednesdays go up every Wednesday at 2 p.m. Eastern. I also do a lot of other videos on Mondays and Fridays at 2 p.m. Eastern. So if that sounds like your thing, I hope to see you back here soon. Thank you guys so much for watching, and I will see you on the next one. Bye!